welcome back to another episode of When We're Not Hustling, the Afterparty. Today we are talking about the episode with Jessie Sage.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm the producer of When We're Not Hustling, asking you to like, subscribe, share, do all the stuff.
Hi, I'm Emery Fields. I'm a male escort and a professional dancer. Happy to be the guest on this time's Afterparty.
Jessie Sage, I like her so much. She has led a life that's very different than the one I've led as an adult, and she talked at the beginning of the episode about living in a van for years.
I am so envious. This is something I've always wanted to do, to live in a van. And this summer, it hit an all-time high peak. I took a 2-week road trip in Nova Scotia, and all I wanted to do was sell all of my possessions and live in a van, to the point where every time a truck drove by or like a boxcar drove by, I was like, I could live in that. I could live in that. That one's a little too small. That one would take some work. That one I could totally live in for the rest of my life. Oh my gosh, I had so much envy listening to this whole
What
episode.
would you do, Emery? Like, what would you do in the van? Like, what is your vision?
My vision is that I've always wanted to do like a US road trip. So I feel like as soon as I got it, first thing I would do would be to drive across country. I would drive towards the west along the south side of the US, and then drive up California, and then drive back along the north side of the US. And that would be number one, like first bucket list. And then after that, I would just try and live the simplest, most minimalist life that I possibly can. And try and keep my life pretty much as similar as possible. Right now, I bounce around between Philadelphia, New York City, upstate New York, and Montreal, and I just kind of keep doing those rounds. But I bring my whole life with me, and it sounds so magical, because right now I just go with like a carry-on size suitcase and a personal item, and I leave home for 3 months at a time, and I miss having my stuff. And this would solve all of my problems / create a million new ones, but solve all of my problems.
Yeah, so I've lived in a van, and I've lived in some very, very, very small and alternative living spaces. Lived very minimally. And now I live in a 4-bedroom house with basement and an attic, and I am so in love with it. So, it goes both ways. I tell you one thing that just as a free piece of advice: if you plan on living in a van, you will spend a lot of your time cleaning. It is insane how much small spaces smell. Like, you don't think about it, you're just like, oh, smaller space, less stuff, like, but you bring all of you, and you create a whole bunch of dust and smell and stink and grime and meh, and like, the smaller the space, the more it gets on everything, and there is a lot more removing of everything and cleaning of everything and putting everything back than I had expected, coming from a larger space, because in a larger space you don't have to do that as much. Like, my sheets stay cleaner on my bed than they do in a van, because there's a lot of space for circulation. I don't spend all day on that bed, even though, call back to a couple episodes ago with bed rotting, I do spend a lot of time in bed, but still, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But there is something really, really magical about, and I do still do this even in a larger space, one bowl. I was raised Buddhist, and there's minimalism. It's kind of built into the mental concept, and it kind of spills over into the physical. And like, you have one bowl, and you have one spoon and fork and knife, and why do you need more? Like, yes, of course, have them for guests, but wash your one bowl. Develop a relationship with it, love it, and like, minimalist living really allows for every item to be that one bowl. Everything is that one thing, and it really is a person who loves curation. It's so beautiful, like, oh, well, I certainly would love that backpack, but it doesn't have the holder for these things that I'll need in this situation, and just like getting to like the perfect one thing is very lovely. But I'm
So
talking for a long time, but I like the big space right now.
Oh,
I
I
was
hear
gonna
that. I
say,
hear that.
I love a road trip and I love to travel, but I grew up very poor and like nomadic parents. So I went to 17 schools before I graduated
Ooh.
from high school. And we were very housing insecure, and that was part of it, like bouncing around. And there were times when we lived in like a trailer in somebody's yard. It was like not a trailer, not our yard, and had to like go into his house to go to the bathroom. And yeah, there was like a lot. And so for me, and I have a trauma response to, like to me, like housing security and feeling like I have a place that isn't going to just like disappear is so irrational. Like I have like an irrational trauma based like need for that, and I like live in I bought a house. I live in a house that also has a lot of bedrooms and like a basement, and sometimes I feel like overwhelmed by it because it is a lot of work too. Like it's a different kind of work, but like on the other hand, like I get a lot of joy out of feeling like this is my place. And also just like knowing because I do have a lot of like trauma, like money and scarcity, knowing like, well, if the shit really, I will sell my house and then I will have
Right.
money. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's something like about that um I don't think I could be that free. And I don't think I could be that free because it would come for me with a lot of baggage about fear of like insecurity.
I get that completely. But one of the things that scares me about that whole idea, and probably why I haven't pulled the trigger on doing it, is the idea that your mode of transportation and your house are all kind of bundled into one. And
Yeah.
if that ever goes for any reason, an accident or breaks down,
Yeah.
it's all gone.
Yeah.
You got nothing left. Um, uh,
Mhm.
and then at the same time, the desire that you're talking about to have your own space, I think that's one of my biggest desires for this.
Yeah.
Because I'm traveling so much and because I love traveling
Mhm.
and I want to keep
Mhm.
doing it,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I want to bring my space with me.
That
That
makes
seems
sense
like the
to
Yeah.
me.
solution. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I can understand that too because I felt, and this is slightly different, but I think it comes from the same place. Like I personally really like hotel rooms, like
Mm.
it, but at this point in my job, like I like travel. I like traveling. I like staying places. I like having like clean your suit and like change your bed sheets every day. That feels like such a luxury, you know. But at this point in my like career too, I keep thinking like I want to move toward a have my own influence. And the reason for that is that like things start to feel so like anonymous too. And like, what if I could decorate it and my stuff was there and it felt like
Hmm.
a part of me? And I went there every time it was the same. My stuff was the same. And I didn't have to pack a bag of all the things that need to be in this room because it was just there. And it feels like that's like a similar impulse to you feeling like you want to take your life with you wherever you are.
Hmm. 100%. And I feel that exactly what you're talking about when I'm staying in a hotel or if I'm staying with a friend or if I'm being put up
Mhm.
by a production in some location. When I this feels very petty to say, but when I look at something like in a design or in a home setup or something that I would do differently, those are the moments when I really want my own space. I'm like, I just
Yeah.
want my own space that I can make those decisions. Uh,
Mhm.
um, Through some like unfounded desire of I would do it better, or or just because you want that kind of sense
Well,
of
you have your
control.
own like
Yeah,
sense of
just an
I
style
aesthetic.
too. That
Yeah,
you're like, I wouldn't pick these colors. I would
yeah,
pick these
yeah.
ones.
But it's also this jealousy of like they got to make
mm,
those decisions, and I want to make those decisions too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I travel with my own bedding and
Yes.
art, and like I definitely bring, if I'm going to be somewhere for longer than a week,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mhm.
even if it's less than a week depending on where it is,
Mm.
like especially if it was a hotel room, I absolutely would. I'll bring an
Mhm.
additional suitcase of just aesthetics.
Yeah.
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 My
Mhm.
stuff. I bring,
Yeah.
I remake the bed. And
Great.
it's not about cleanliness. Like,
No.
I'll often use their sheets. It's about the coverlet. It's
Yeah.
about like,
Yeah.
I might bring books that I probably won't read, but they
Oh
look
yeah.
really pretty on the bedside table. And I've
Yeah.
brought vases to places. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely do. I'm hearing you guys describe this. I'm like, I do that. I bring
Mhm.
it with me. I pay the
Mhm.
extra to have my shit because it does matter. Like, if
Mhm.
I'm gonna
Totally.
spend 2 weeks in a room, I am gonna miss my blanket.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
Yeah, I have a
bringing
friend
it.
who I learned that from, who whenever she would go anywhere for more than a week, she would go and buy a plant, some potted plant, and add it to the
Oh,
space.
Yes.
Even though she can't take it with her afterwards, if you're there
yeah.
for a week,
It
it's
doesn't
worth
matter.
it. Just a
It's,
little bit
yeah,
of a home.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that totally makes sense to me. And when my teenage son moved out, and was out of the house, I took his room this last summer and turned it into a guest room. And that meant that, like, when we moved into the house, like our bedroom, it's like we had some stuff and we put it in our room. It wasn't like we started from scratch, but like
Right.
that room, I started from scratch because my son's stuff isn't in there anymore, and like I redid the whole thing and then picked out every single part of it and decorated it. And then when it was done, like I go in there all the time and like I'll have a bedroom, but like sometimes I sleep in the guest room. And not because I'm mad at my partner, but because I'm like, oh,
Oh,
I
it's
like
so
this.
lovely.
Oh, it's
Yes.
so nice. I like the color, it's relaxing. I'll write my columns in there. I'll like set myself up in the bed and be like, I have an office too. But like there's something about like this,
Yeah.
but there's something about like I created that space and it's set up exactly how I like it, and I'm gonna go sit in it because it makes me feel good, or sleep in it, or nap in it, or bed rock. I don't know. There's a bed in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love this notion. Like I love travel, and like you're saying, like I love road trips, and I
Mhm.
like seeing kinds of things. But like as she was talking, and was like having this panic, like oh my god, no. But I mean, like I was too.
Oh my gosh. No, 100%. I could do it. I could do it.
Yeah.
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 Would you want to do it by yourself, or would you want to do it like with somebody? Like, are you good at
Hmm.
traveling by yourself?
I'm pretty good at traveling by myself. I think I'd have like different legs of the trip. Part of it I would
Uh,
definitely want to do by myself, but then I'd
mhm.
probably invite friends to come join me for legs of it,
Yeah.
or go
Nice.
and intentionally visit friends throughout it.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I ask him because there's been kind of a theme in this show that's come up a couple times. Once with Jim DeMilo, and then also once with Gayla and Grace, where they were talking about like traveling solo and like what it brought to them. And seems like actually I like what you're saying because like there's value in alone time, and then there's value in sharing things with people too.
Hmm. Absolutely. And
I
also,
love traveling alone.
oh, dreams. Uh,
Yeah.
it's also just the like change of pace is healthy.
Mhm.
Hmm.
If
Mhm.
you start a trip alone and it's only ever going to be alone, then there's kind of no light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
I'm alone and this is who I am for the rest of my life. And then same thing, if you're traveling with a friend and you're going to be with that person the entire trip, you're like, well, here we are, we're stuck. But if there is that kind of finite time period where we're going to be together for a week and then afterwards, number one, you're like, if it's not going well for some reason, there's a light at the end
Mhm.
of the tunnel. And then
Right.
number two, even if it is going great, like just knowing that it's going to end at this time and having that clarity, you cherish it for longer.
Mhm.
Yeah, we only have
Mhm.
so long. Yeah.
My ex-husband and I, when we were 20, so we were very young, and I was much less in need of comfort then. We started in Memphis, Tennessee, because he was doing like we talked about this. He was doing like a summer internship at University of Memphis. And we drove from. We got a tent at like a Walmart, like a cheap tent, and we started in Memphis, Tennessee, and we drove down to New Orleans, and then we drove across to Florida, and then up to Washington, D.C., and then back to San Diego, where we lived. It took like 3 weeks or something because we stopped in all these places. and we stayed at a lot of campsites, like pitched our tent, and I'll never forget doing that. Like that was such a fun thing. But we were in a car and we had a tent, and often we would go to like AOAs where we could like shower and um, dip in a pool and do something that felt a little less camp campy. And then like go. And it's funny because my grandfather is a person who, before the internet existed, when he traveled a lot, he was in the Navy. He would, every time he was in a new city, he would open the phone book to what my last name is and like call all those people in the city and be like, are we related? You know, this is pre ancestry.
Wow.
And so he
Wow.
knew all these people. So like I would give him my trip itinerary and he'd be like, oh, in this city, you're going to stay with this person. In this city, you're going to stay. And
So cool.
that was so fun because we didn't have like an agenda. We were just like, let's just see what happens. Go, and it was really fun. It was a really good adventure. But to your point, I think like we also knew it was going to end. You know, we
Hmm.
were like, it was easier to be like, it's so hot in Louisiana, I die, and I'm being eaten alive by mosquitoes. But you know, like I'll be in Florida on the Panhandle tomorrow and I'll sleep at somebody's house and have a meal and it'll be fine.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely.
I don't
I
know now I could camp in Louisiana in August. I don't think I could do it. But I used to be young and flexible.
I'm pretty sure only young people end up with that plan.
So who wants to do that? It's amazing.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Too funny.
Yeah.
I loved listening to this episode as someone who personally has never done drugs, and
Mm.
I'm very boring on paper. Vegan, don't do drugs, don't drink. I've never been drunk, like all of this business. But listening to her talk about it, I am intrigued. I will admit, when she was talking about like the studies that have been done of when people take this drug and like looking at the imaging of the brain
Mhm.
and how you would expect it that there's more going on, but then actually there was less.
Yeah.
And her idea, my mind was completely blown. Her idea of our brain is actually usually doing so much processing to
Mhm.
make the world digestible to us, and this drug just kind of like removing that layer or like turning
Hmm.
the brain off and calming
Mhm.
it down and seeing the world as maybe as it actually is. um, that was the most fascinating thing I've ever heard, and like the best
Mhm.
case that I've ever heard for actually experimenting with these. And I'm like, well, hmm, maybe I could see it.
I I'm very much like you. I mean, I talked about doing ketamine in the episode, and that's been like really life altering to me. But like before that, I didn't even like try marijuana until I was like in my 40s. Like, and I'm not that person. I'm like, it was whatever. But it's not like interesting to me really. And the harder drugs, I I'm from a family with a lot of addiction and a lot of drug use. So like from I've seen families get like ripped apart. My sisters have lost kids to the state because of drug use and addiction. And things have been like, to me, I've had a like almost like a fear response to drugs. Like I don't want to go down that path because I've seen it just like obliterate people's lives, and that's all like true. But there's also this other side of drug use that isn't. And the way that she talked about that, I had the same response. Like, and I wanted to, that there's something so interesting about going into it with like an intention of wanting to have an experience. And I was thinking about this in the shower or not shower, but like while I was getting ready this morning. I don't have water, so it was not my water tank broke today. But I was thinking about this as I was getting ready, and I was listening to her, and I was thinking about the part about drugs that have been so scary to me is people entering into them to escape something. And what she's talking about is not entering into them to escape, but to toward. It's like a toward something, not
Mm.
from something, and
Mhm.
that seems
Yeah.
significant. And those weren't that wasn't language that she used, but it seems to me like
But yeah, no, that's
something
very
about.
fair.
Mm-hmm,
No, I was raised in a very drug forward space, but when I say that, I realize I've never really qualified this, and I probably should because of that. Like
mm-hmm,
when I did acid for the first time at 17, I was required to read all of you know the
mm-hmm,
books about it. I
mm-hmm.
had to sit down and talk to mom about it. We had to talk about our intentions, and these drugs do not exist on this planet for your pleasure. You exist on this planet for the the furthering of, like, there was so much,
Mm.
which
Mm-hmm.
a lot of me rolls my eyes at, but also without that sort of sacredness brought into it, I think it would have been a very, very different situation. So
Yeah,
let me just be clear, when I say that I grew up in a drug permissive situation in my family and that I did drugs with my mom a couple times, it wasn't fun.
yeah,
It wasn't not fun, but it wasn't like, certainly
yeah.
wasn't to escape anything. We had to look at
Right.
everything. We had to know about the interconnected web and
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
what the Kineveda related to. It's like there wasn't exactly essays afterwards, but like
Mm.
it was close.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was very close to
Wow.
like, what did you learn? And
Mhm.
and what did your ancestors
Yeah.
think?
Oh my gosh.
There's like, yeah, it horrifies me to think of people doing a certain class of drugs, the psychedelics specifically, for escapism. I'm like,
Right.
do you do you know what your ego just goes away, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't seem to
Mm.
acknowledge that you and ego are different things. What are you going to do when it goes away? Like there's okay. But like a
Mhm.
lot of drugs allow, specifically the psychedelics. Pot's kind of its own little world over there, but I don't view it as a psychedelic and
Yeah.
does not deserve the
Yeah. It's fine.
classification it has.
Right.
But like, everything from ayahuasca to mushrooms to acid to ketamine, anything that sort of uh, diminishes ego, enhances
Mhm.
perception, right?
Mm.
Mhm.
DMT is in there. They all have
Yeah.
their own ways, but all of those, there is no way that I'm capable of doing them with. Frankly, I even do this when I've done cocaine. It's the same way. It's like, what am I learning about myself? What is
Mhm.
my brain doing? What is my
Mhm.
spirit doing? How are they relating to each other? How can I observe this while I am
Yeah.
not mired in the self of body?
Right.
And like, they're incredible tools. It's incredible to exist as a being in a body with a mind and a consciousness,
Yeah.
and always have them woven together, and
Mhm.
then to have a substance into your body that allows them to separate
Mm.
for a little
Mhm.
while,
Mhm.
not in a weird you're no longer whole way, but in a, oh,
Mhm.
that's ego, oh my god, how cute, oh, I thought that was me, oh, okay. And like, oh, that's what they meant when they said togetherness, not that shit, but oh, got it. There's just these like very human experiences of comprehension for me
Mm.
more than anything. um
Yeah.
and also, it's very fun for me personally to get drunk and do a little coke in the bar and just escape everything. I want to be clear. I'm not all holy, and it's not all, sacred white dresses. It's not. No.
Mhm.
But I can't imagine taking any hallucinogen and not having a
Yeah.
connection to spirit, even if it's just, we're having fun.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean,
but
we were talking in the episode about intention and like what it means to enter into like using some sort of drug with intention as opposed to not. And that's
right,
been something that like I've been thinking a lot about, which is like doing like using like these class of drugs like in this way to try to experience something like what Emery was saying, quiet the parts of your brain that are like too loud, that are taking up too much space. I mean, that's kind of the example that I gave of like what one of the most transformative. I've had like several like transformative things, but the example that I gave, like of my relationship, like what it allowed me to do was like quiet down, like spiraling of like all the things that were going to happen to like actually focusing on like what is there. I think that you can't do that if you're just like randomly like taking drugs in like a more
Yeah, I agree.
in a less thoughtful way because you're not
Yeah,
directing what you're doing at like the things that you're trying to
Hmm.
experience.
absolutely. And there's a certain amount of self awareness and presence in the here and now um,
Mm-hmm,
that it certainly doesn't hurt to have training in that
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
before ever doing drugs,
mm-hmm,
because it's not about, ooh, look at the pretty
mm-hmm,
purple thing. It's like, oh, how fascinating in the experience of doing this, purple was also there.
Hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's also about being really grounded in that moment, or you sort of, in my opinion, kind of
mm-hmm.
waste it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean you just took acid and laughed all night? Like, there was shit to be gleaned there. Like, did you
My
really waste one of
therapist,
your, like,
yeah, when I told my therapist I was going to do ketamine before I did it, she was like, I don't think you should do that until like you've had experience that's not drug related that will
hmm,
open you up to that. And she
Hmm.
sent me to a sound
hmm,
as preparation for it. And I'm glad that she did that because she wanted to make sure that like mm, came up for me that was gonna like completely freak me out. So
Hmm.
like
yeah,
how are there other ways that you get into that sort of like theta state where you do quiet down all of those other things without also
yeah,
being like completely disassociated from yourself because you're on, so like
yes,
but that's kind of what you're talking about is like going into like
yeah, deep
learning how to
meditation.
access
Yeah,
a meditative state
yeah,
so that you actually take advantage of like what it is that you're doing. Henry, like I'm
yeah.
curious, like what you so you were saying that it, like made you like interested. What do you
Hmm.
think that you would want to like if you were to do something, like what did it make you think like I would really like to have these kinds of
Hmm.
experiences?
It kind of goes back to the conversation we were having about Josie's episode. This kind of constant seeking of self awareness or trying to improve
Mhm,
our self awareness. I am so curious, like if I had an experience where the ego was just completely stripped away to discover how much I'm getting in the way.
mhm,
We were talking about last time these experiences of like you feel so confident in a way
mhm.
about something, about anything. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what. I'm so curious to find out how many things that if I stripped away the ego that I would discover, oh, actually, I'm completely wrong about that. Oh, this is actually
Yeah.
something completely
Mhm,
different, or
yeah.
any variations within that. That's what I'm
Mhm,
so fascinated about, the
yeah.
rewiring of the brain, because we
Yeah.
we get just so used
Yeah.
to our words become our thoughts, become our actions, and we
Mhm,
just like create more and more grooves until we believe
mhm.
a thing 100%.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated to just kind of smooth out those grooves a little bit and lay down some
Mhm.
new ones and see where
Yeah.
I come out on the other side. That sounds so educational. It sounds so
Yeah.
exciting. It sounds
Mhm.
absolutely horrifying, so scary. But in a way that's really exciting. Like this was the first time that I was like, yeah, oh, absolutely, I want that.
Yeah.
I want that 100%. Especially these grooves that we lay down in really intense periods of our lives, like in
Mhm.
moments of deep depression for me. There's
Yeah.
so many relationships with people in my life and attitudes that I have around like certain relationship dynamics or things that
Yeah.
just really scare me because of past experiences that I've had. I'm
Sure.
curious to see how I would feel about them with kind of those layers kind of either removed or at least pulled back a significant amount.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I when like earlier many, many years ago, I watched this movie called What the Bleep Do We Know, which is kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
So great.
it is great. And I'll never forget, because I studied philosophy in school, so we always like are talking about like perception, experience, and what we can know that we know, and we don't know what we know. And I remember at the very beginning of the movie, there was like a neuroscientist who was talking about the fact that like we take in really much numbers, but like so many like bits of information per second, but our brain can only process like a very small fraction of that. So our brains are like making choices about what we perceive and what we don't perceive because we just can't like take in everything at once. And I think about this so much because in those like creating the neural pathways that like allow us to perceive some things and not other things means that we're always constructive in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
the way
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
we're
Our worlds are constructs. Yes.
the world of constructs, we're absolutely deciding what we see and what we don't see. And all of that is unconscious, obviously. But like, what would it be like to step into a world that's like different perception?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, one of the things that I feel like you're picking up on from what she was saying, but also of what we're talking about of like, what if we loosen those like the grip on reality that we have and the neural pathways that we've like so heavily traipsed over and over and over again and think about something new and different ways to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the only thing I would add to that is I think in small ways, you're describing enlightenment, right? Like
Mhm,
by stripping away the perceptions that we have or the lack of them, really.
mhm,
We say that backwards. And
mhm,
um, and the ego that also is an internal perception, we strip all of this away and we have this moment of enlightenment where we're able to
mhm.
look at our relationship with our moms and see
Yeah.
them as human and just forgive that. Just be like,
Mhm.
oh God, I really held you to a role,
Mm.
Yeah.
but instead you're a person.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you
Mhm,
for filling that role as much as you did. The evidence that
mhm.
I'm here means that you at least did something. Love you, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the only thing I would say to that is before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Wow.
Do it. Get
Mhm,
in there. Give yourself as much time as you possibly can afterwards to enjoy or be disgusted or just reflect on it.
mhm.
But remember that I do see my mom as a beautiful whole individual. She did
Mhm.
everything she could, and she's still a dumb bitch. She didn't do everything that I needed, and I'm petty as hell still.
You
And
know,
like,
I was talking to my friend Angela the other day, and she said something that was like struck me so deeply about like mothers, but it's like applicable to like we were talking about this in a previous after party about like seeing the we were talking about Josie's after party, about seeing people who were fulfilling this role as somehow like more.
better, more, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she said that a friend of hers told her in relationship to her mom, you know, I've had to realize, I had to allow myself to internalize the fact that this is also her first time in this life,
Mm.
like trying to live.
yeah,
Um, there's something that we do with people who are just ahead of us that are like, they must have it figured out. But like, and it's also their first time taking a stab at this like thing we call life. And
yeah,
there's something really freeing about that. But I was also thinking, because I know both of you like personally, and I know that we all have siblings, and it's interesting when you think about like um, siblings when talking about these perceptions. Like if you talk to your siblings about like your growing up, you're like, what house did you live in?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
It's
yeah. We used to
so
call it the soccer ball. Like you put your panel on and I'll put my panel on. And then if we keep putting all the panels on, we might get kind of a whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
sometimes my sisters will be like, do you remember this thing? And I'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And vice versa, that
Mm-hmm.
it's like the things we choose to view like our family structures, but also not just our whole lives, like through our lens. And it can be radically different than somebody who like traveled right next to you the whole time.
yeah. No, there's 8 billion people in the world. There's 8 billion versions of me. And not a
Mhm,
single one of them lines up with how I see myself. So,
mhm.
Mhm.
which eye is I don't know. What are we doing right now?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, 100%. My siblings and I also are really close together. There's like
Mm,
1 year between all of us. So you would think that our experiences would be very closely related. Not at all. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Yeah. When we didn't really actually talk about a bunch of things that went down in our childhood until after we had all graduated college. And I just took that completely for granted. I assumed that we all had the same
Mhm,
mentality, that they all thought the same way, about
mhm.
our parents and things that happened. And
Yeah.
no,
No.
completely not. Yeah. The like
No.
protagonist in one person's story was the villain in another person's story. And it was,
Yeah.
wow. Oh, wow. So enlightening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
disassociated through some of my siblings' most important parts of their childhood and
Mhm,
vice versa.
Hmm.
They were just busy playing on the floor while I was over here having this life changing
Yep.
experience. It
Yep.
turns out
mhm.
didn't even blip on their
Uh
screen.
huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you're saying, Henry, like one of the values of maybe doing something like these psychedelics is being able to open up and be like, what did I miss?
Hmm.
What am
Hmm.
I holding on to too tightly that's making me think about things in this way and not this other way? And what might
Yeah.
other possibilities be? And there's something so intriguing.
Absolutely. I feel like our brain does so much work, and thank goodness it does so much work to protect us.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
it really has all of these really handy techniques that I'm sure without I would just be a puddle on the floor.
Mhm.
But I'm so curious to see how much I'm getting in the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that it's some magical thing that would show me what actually happened in my life, but
Right. Right.
yeah, maybe just a
And even if
slightly
it
clearer
did, you would
glimpse.
still have to get up and pee
Yeah.
afterwards. So, like,
Uh-huh. Sure enough. Sure enough. Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
that's the
That's
part I
good.
think that's most important. Like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, you can. You can. You can
No.
do the whole thing and
Mhm.
really get it.
Hmm.
But you still have to pee and eat some sandwiches the next day. So, like,
No.
Yeah.
No. Obviously, I'm going to transcend this earthly body, and we'll have no
right.
more physical constraints. Yeah.
Mom?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
It turns out, even if you're ready for that, it doesn't really happen that
Oh,
often. Just want to warn y'all.
fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And that like that was so powerful for you in that way,
Mm.
like listening to all of that. But it's also, and I want to wrap this up soon, but I also thought it was really important to think about, especially like from a sex work perspective, we know the ways that like our legal system works to like
Mm.
keep women down to like how what the interconnectedness between like sex laws, reproductive rights stuff, and all of these things, and to control our bodies. And it was interesting to think about this from the perspective of like other ways that our bodies are controlled. So like, what
right.
are we allowed to do and what are we not allowed to do? Like based on the government, so we're allowed to drink, but we're not allowed to do idols. Why is that? And what is going on there? I thought it was really interesting the way that she brought like the history of like how things to like into light in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's once you start delving into the history of it, it's just steeped in racism and control. That's
Mm-hmm.
pretty much the two reasons.
No.
And who makes money off of things, So
yeah.
are white people going to be able to make money off of ayahuasca? Well, maybe if it's
How?
heavily
How
controlled,
are
but
white
like,
people going to make money
yeah.
off of
Hmm.
It is
ayahuasca?
inevitable. Yeah.
Because it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Right now it's through
Yeah.
fines and and
Right. Right.
confiscation
Exactly.
until there's
Mhm.
enough control of the growing and then, perhaps it'll be in the selling someday. But like,
Yeah.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And so
That's a terrible place to end. Say something lovely and
lovely. Um, the lovely thing is that I am ending. So I did like this, like ketamine program, which has been life
Oh,
changing.
right. Yeah, yeah.
But I only have 2 weeks of it left, and I could renew and get another 24 weeks or something. But I'm not going to do that because of money, and I also like want to take a break from that because there is some point at which like after a while it's not as transformative as it was like in the beginning. So I want to stop for a while. But there's a part of me that's like really sad because this like
Yeah.
ritual with myself that became this weekly thing that I did
Mm.
felt very good. So I think that what I could take from that is like, I want something in my life that's like a coming back to myself in some way. And I think that,
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, I'm going to do my
Nice.
thing. I'm going to like
That
try
is
to get in touch
lovely.
with myself.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be shaped like this, but something I think that it did give me is like a realization of how much I want to turn inward on a regular
Right.
basis. Maybe we can even tie that all the way back to bed rotting at the beginning.
Right?
And what Emily was talking about in terms of like scheduling time to yourself, like
Mhm.
whatever that looks like, I think that I'm going to want to create something that has that structure of time to myself that's not for anything else.
So important.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
So, listeners, I need you to open your calendar apps, pick up your pencil, whatever it might be. Everyone needs to put into their schedule right now time for bed rotting. Ayahuasca is optional.
Ayahuasca optional. Excellent.
Sounds
Ah,
good. Yeah, so I also thought it was really interesting, and I'm glad she shared her stories of being on the road and doing psychedelics. Oh,
yeah.
one thing I want to say is that, like, before we go, is that story of her, like, depression being, like, and self doubt being more or less cured by her experience on MDMA was, like, so lovely.
Mm.
Yeah. I want that for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Doing drugs did not cure my depression, but I have a very different relationship with it because of them.
Mm.
That is very true.
Mm-hmm.
Like chemical depression is chemical depressions. The only drugs that help that are legal. Um, but,
Mhm.
but the part of me that used to perpetuate some of the experiences there has a different way of relating.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I do believe that they can help some depression, and my hope is that that continues to happen for people, legal or not.
No.
Yeah.
I hear it. Yeah, listening to this episode definitely made me more excited about leading a better life through chemical assistance. Yeah, I've been trying to go substance free for so long. Like for a while, it was a conscious choice, and then after a while, I didn't really believe in that, but just never got around to it. But
Yeah.
I'm more interested. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I want to say about that. Right? It seems like part of the appeal of sobriety, the kind of sobriety that
Mm.
you have, is that it allows you to really touch in with yourself and your
Mm-hmm.
feelings. Like you don't disassociate from those in the same way. But also, I think one of the things that Sun was saying is like that sort of like intentional chemical assistance can also do.
Yeah, yeah. It can only help. It can only assist.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all
I
about intentionality, it seems like.
absolutely, yeah. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently just signed up for a 10-day silent meditation retreat that
Mm,
Wow.
I'm
those are so
super excited
lovely.
about. I have a
Yeah.
couple of friends who did this one specifically, and they said it was simultaneously the best and the worst thing that they've ever done. It was
Sure.
the hardest thing they've ever done, like the first 3 days, and then after that, it gets a little better, and then it gets so much worse, and then it gets really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, uh,
I'm like, I don't want to do it again
uh-huh.
right now, but you can see my face
Heard.
remembering how it felt getting through it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'm kind of I'm curious to see. It kind of feels like,
Mhm.
or I'm hoping it's going to be something similar to this, where after 10 days of just learning these meditation practices and kind of just having no other, like they say that you can't read or write or speak or exercise or do yoga, like you're kind of all reliant on this meditation method. I'm so curious to see what that is going to do to, and I'm hoping that it's going to kind of get a lot of the white noise out of the way,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that I
Yeah.
can see a little clearer, as well as hopefully just relieving a little bit of this dopamine addiction that I have going on.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that'd be nice. So
Mhm.
I'm hoping for some similar, if not adjacent, results.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place to
Awesome.
end.
Yeah. Oh, have a wonderful
Oh,
time.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So this was When We're Not Hustling. I'm Jessie Sage. And if you haven't already, please go back and listen to Sen Sage's episode where she talks about the value of psychedelic medicine.
I'm Emily Foster. I can tell you there's value to psychedelic medicine, and it may even help you to like, subscribe, share, and generally get the word out about us. But probably that'll come from your ego. I don't know.
I'm
Or from ours.
Or
yeah,
definitely
whichever.
mine,
Yeah,
just so we're clear.
yeah. I'm Emery Fields, and I was so happy to be here with both of you again. Thanks for having
Yeah.
me.